Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual open house for Lake Champlain Waldorf School. My name is Amy Brennan. I'm the Director of Enrollment here, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning. I'm excited to share with you about our high school program and to introduce you to our teachers and students and alumni and some parents that we have here for you today. Just get started by sharing my screen. Here we go. So a little bit about our school. We were founded in 1984 as a very small school by a group of parents in the basement of Trinity Church in Shelburne. And we eventually moved over to the Turtle Lane campus that now houses our early childhood and lower schools. And in the 1990s, a group of parents and community members came together to start planning for our high school program and moved into the old creamery building in Charlotte. And then you'll see in this next photo, the property that we moved into in 2012. After graduating our first high school class in 2005, in 2012, we acquired the Morgan Horse Farm property on Bostwick Road. And parents, David Pill of Pill Maharam Architects, redesigned and renovated this building that now houses our upper school, grades 7 through 12. So these two campuses, the Turtle Lane and the Bostwick Road campus, are about a mile apart. So just a short drive or a nice walk. And students do sometimes walk in between the two campuses. And I will share at the end a video tour that gives you a deeper look inside this building and outside as well. But I just wanted to share a glimpse inside the building during this time when it's really hard for us to get together in person and see spaces in person. I wanted to give you a window in. So a little bit more about our school. This is our high school art studio here. We are an arts integrated program throughout all the grades. The arts are integrated into the academics throughout the whole grade school and the high school. We also have a very strong focus on social justice throughout the grades and on working with and in the natural world, both in the course of daily study, weekly study, and also through immersive experiences like trips, one of which you'll see here. This was last year's 12th grade end of year backpacking camping trip. So next I would like to introduce you to our panelists. First, you will hear from Jazz Darland, our head of school. And then you'll hear from Danielle Dragalis, who is a member of our board of trustees. And Danielle has also taught at the high school level, both at the Waldorf school and in other high school settings. You'll hear from Emily Fuchs, who is our high school humanities and languages teacher. Steve Crimmy is here. He is our high school math and history teacher. And then I also have several students that you'll hear from and some parents. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Jazz to begin.
Good morning. I'm here to talk about Waldorf high school education in the 21st century. Because high school, as we know of it, is a very 20th century idea. It was created and developed to meet two needs. One was for industrial labor and one was for military service. And I actually have a quote from the US Commissioner of Education at the time, William Harris, about the purpose of high school education. Let's see here. He says, our schools are, in a sense, factories in which the raw material, children, are to be shaped and fashioned into marketable products. The specifications for manufacturing come from the demands of civilization, and it is the business of the schools to build its pupils according to the specifications laid down. Obviously, that's a very 20th century model, and we're all working with something very different today. We see a different need in our students. And luckily, here in Vermont, we are working in partnership all together across the state with a program of capacities that high school students should be developing rather than skills. And the important difference between talking about skills and talking about capacities is really the tense that they center. So a skill means I have learned this and now I can do this. And a capacity means I've developed the ability to grow in this important way. It's very future oriented. We're planting these seeds and developing who the student can be, not looking to them to graduate high school as a finished and complete human being. On the surface of our high school experience, you see a lot of really beautiful art. Art is a great example of the uniquely interdisciplinary approach that Waldorf high school education takes. The art is sort of the skin that holds in the body of the Waldorf high school education. We empower all of our students as artists. We have yet to encounter a student who's not able to find artistic expression that's meaningful to them. And it's such a valuable way of exploring yourself and coming into understanding of yourself as a young adult. So our students have opportunities to explore and experiment in a safe and creatively fulfilling way, but we're not an art school. It's an important distinction. Waldorf graduates actually major in math and sciences at twice the rate of other students. And Waldorf students are also 11 times more likely than their peers to start a business out of high school as a young entrepreneur. And I'm delighted to share that our College of Teachers has recently identified social entrepreneurship and business ethics and collaborative capitalism as one of these areas that's been latent in the curriculum for nearly a century, but is ready to be brought out more fully and amplified more. And so we're looking ahead to doing that through alumni mentors, internships with B corporations. We're partnering with CCV to allow our students to be able to take classes there as well. This generation of students, the children that we're raising and educating right now, are going to be called on to literally save the world. It's not hyperbole. They're going to need to solve the world's problems in a creative and collaborative way. And being able to do that will require both skills and capacities and hope and interest and confidence and so much more. Our high school program does its best to take a big perspective and to work individually with students to empower the person that they are meant to be to go out and make change in the world. Our high school program is intellectually demanding. We ask a lot of our students in a lot of different ways. As you'll hear from some of our teachers in a little bit, though, that's very different from assigning a lot of homework every night. We create a high school experience that honors the liminal space that they're occupying between young adolescents and young adults, and the fact that on any given day their place in that might be different and subjective, and we really try to build in respect for that stage. I was a Waldorf high school student myself, and one of the lessons that I remember clearly was about the Peloponnesian War and the idea that in Sparta they knew war was inevitable. And so they set up a lifestyle that mimicked the strains and stresses of war. They trained for war, they prepared for war, they ate war rations, they slept in the cold in their shields wrapped in a cloak. And in Athens, they also knew war was inevitable. And so they resolved to benefit from peace for as long as they could. Instead of training for war, they trained for athletics and gymnastics and dance. They created art and they let it move them. They created theater and they used it to explore ideas of identity and otherness and to understand themselves and their neighbors. They created democracy and ensured that when war came, it would be with the consent of their society. And when war came, it was the Athenian approach that bore out. There is stress ahead for our students in college and in life and beyond. There are 70-hour weeks. We don't deny that, but we don't think that the way to prepare for it is by bringing those stresses and those strains into the high school experience. This time of life can be really beautiful and sacred and full of joy. And so, the Waldorf High School isn't a 4-year mimicking of the adult world. It isn't a list of skills and standards that are handed down from on high. It's a group of dedicated educators who love what they teach and are deeply committed to each student. It's 4 years of inner transformation and community service out in the world. It's a curriculum that is classical and cutting edge. It is creative and rigorous. It's joyful and also deeply demanding. And it's a place where it's safe to be who you are and where you are supported by your teachers, by your peers, by the structure of your education in growing into the person that you're meant to be. And I'm really excited to have you hear from some of our teachers about what it means to them to be educating these students in these ways.
Thank you so much, Jazz. Danielle, would you like to speak next?
Sure. So I've been asked to speak about what makes Lake Champlain so different. And I think the context in which I want to put that sharing into is in the transformations, very much linked to what Jazz was talking about, that education is really going through revolutions in certain states. And certainly in Vermont is the transformation of proficiency-based learning. Other states call that competency-based learning or standards-based learning. And of all that that package is, the intended outcome is that students will start to drive their own learning, that they'll no longer come to school being passive receptacles of information, that they're actually going to become partners with their teachers through connection, relationship, start to and receive formative feedback and engage in reflection, that they're going to start to make learning goals for themselves. They're going to start to drive and sculpt their educational experience based on who they are. And the reality is that is an intended outcome. It doesn't always happen for all students. And it's not a transformation that needs to happen at Lake Champlain, because the reality is somehow this place has already authentically mastered the recipe of such an outcome and have been doing it for decades. And so and educational research shows that it's through meaningful connection that teachers form with students that then allow those students to grow exponentially, not just in their learning, but in their confidence, their ability to see themselves as a good learner of anything, and to find their places in their lives outside of school and beyond. And so it's through that connection, which is so strongly formed but amongst teachers and students at Lake Champlain. And there is such a high level of formative feedback that happens on a regular basis. And not just feedback to the students about what they need to work on next and where they have excelled and where they need to continue to be challenged or where to layer in additional challenge. But it's formative feedback also just in the sense of like personhood, in terms of who we are and who we want to be and where we want to go. And so when you take that level of connection and formative feedback that already happens at Lake Champlain, what it leads to is an incredible amount of personalization, which is also a desired outcome in the transformations in the educational systems in this state. And all this happens authentically, and they all happen to such a level that is really unparalleled at any other school. And that is what makes Lake Champlain High School so different.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Emily, would you like to speak next?
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to turn my camera off. My internet connection makes it. Are asking the students to live into an experience more than we are asking them to absorb a myriad of information, which does not mean that the information isn't important, but that the information is contained within an experience, so that when they think back on what they've learned, it is not divorced from meaning. It has a personal the personal memory of their experience. It has a connection to their direct perception of what happened, and it allows them to create this really living picture of what they have learned that is beyond Googling an answer and getting an immediate response. Because that is so much of how we think of information in the 21st century. And what we're doing here is trying to enliven that. And so students can come away with this living picture that allows for synthesis, that allows for deep connection with their own experience and what other information is out in the world. And one of the classes that I teach where I think is a quick example of this is have worked with a science teacher to teach botany. And in this class, the students are getting at the same time both the scientific concepts of the plant world and biology, and then I am working with them with nature writers like Annie Dillard and Sigrid Olsen. And so we're connecting both these this information, these botany concepts, these biological concepts, and how the artists and the writers of the world have written about their experience of seeing this natural world. And with those two experiences together, the students are able in a deeper way to connect what they're doing and what they're seeing with their own inner life and their own feeling life and intellectual life, and really have it stick in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Emily. So now I would like to hear from some of our alumni. And to do that, I'm going to play a video for you since they sent in some clips.
In Waldorf education, you know, we never had classes where we focused on, you know, whether it be chemistry or literature or history in a vacuum. We approached and learned those topics in the context of how they interacted with other topics and other challenges. And that ability that we all gained through that experience allows us to then tackle the challenges we face today in some of our work in ways that help bring together the different influences that create challenges and that can help identify solutions. And so that's something I use every day in my work, is to really understand that a lot of the challenges that I'm trying to solve are not purely in one silo or in one topic, but really an interaction of all sorts of influences.
Say that my Waldorf education also really prepared me to look for connections between my classes. So I often am able to connect themes from a language class to what I'm learning in my psych class, or a study of women and gender class to my psych class. And I think that Waldorf really allowed me to do that because it was so interdisciplinary and we used so many different aspects of our academic skill sets in each topic that we studied.
Something that I found was extremely helpful is how Waldorf, throughout all of the grades, really focuses not only on the academics, but also on learning kind of who you are and being confident in that. And I think in like the interviews and writing my personal essays, I felt really confident in what I wanted to say about myself and what I was bringing to that. And so I think that that kind of gave me a leg up as far as expressing myself and really presenting a whole package. And I think all of my class felt like very, very similar about that.
Describe it as an education that's very focused on connection between people, whether that be with your classmates, as we've all mentioned, or with your teachers. A lot of my friends at Smith have been surprised at how I will like approach professors and engage them in a conversation. And I always attribute that to my Waldorf education and the emphasis that it had on interpersonal relationships. So I always just say that it is an education that really teaches you not only how to be aware in terms of your academics, but also in terms of how you present yourself to other people.
For someone's birthday celebration, every single person would give a little appreciation for that person. So kind of speaks to what we've all been saying about creating strong bonds between all different kinds of people. And so we learned how to really like genuinely appreciate something about each one of our classmates, and we would verbalize that in front of our rest of our class. And that's definitely been valuable for me in college and just in my life in general. Being able to find those things about any person, something I appreciate.
Being in such a small environment at Waldorf really taught me how to accept and tolerate people that I would not have been friends with in a larger setting. And that is something that I really value because it taught me to look for connections with everyone that I was around. And I can really see that now in my group work. I have seen peers who just don't engage because they think, oh, I'm not going to get along with this person, I'm not even going to try. But Waldorf has really taught me to look for those connections and see how I can build off of them to be an effective classmate and peer in academic settings. And it sort of forces you to have your own sense of individuality and to know who you are very strongly in your relationships with other people.
Every science class in Waldorf, whether it be in late elementary school or in high school, was fun, which sounds crazy to some people, but was actually really fun. And it wasn't, structured in a way where we just conducted experiments and wrote down the results in a lab notebook. We were trying to figure out what was going on. We were, shown an experiment and then had to try to figure out why that happened. So it was an inquisitive endeavor instead of just a formulaic one. And that really fueled me to want to study biology in undergrad and then eventually environmental management in graduate school, because my first experiences with science were about problem solving and trying to understand how natural things happened.
We were able to do a week-long backpacking trip just in Vermont and New Hampshire. And there was one night in particular where we had a solo. It was just the 12 of us. And we were in the woods and we decided to sing a song, and it was dark and we were all together. And it was just incredible. And I think that entire trip really brought home how close my relationships are with my class. And I think that that's something that's super special about Waldorf, is because you're with these people so much and it's a smaller class, you form really, really strong relationships. And I think just that trip and especially that moment were really, really incredible in realizing that.
Waldorf education doesn't try and simplify to make the learning easier. Instead, it embraces the complexity of things and asks you to struggle with that and to wrestle with that and to find solutions to the fact that things are complex.
So now I would love for us to hear from some of our students. And with us today, we have Jonas Natvig, who's in our current 10th grade class, and Ren Van Duzen, who's in our 11th grade class. Jonas, would you like to start first?
Sure. So I just have a few things about things I really appreciate about Waldorf. This was kind of brought up and through what people have said and through the alumni things, but I think something that is really important to me and that I value in education is the setting. And I think this one has a perfect balance of laxity and engagement. So you're able to be relaxed in front of your teachers, in front of your peers. In class, it's not all strict, but you're still professional and you're engaged in the work. But there's not a whole lot of pressure to conform a certain way or educate or understand something in a certain way. There's different ways you can understand a concept, and I think that's really important in education. Also, in the small school, you have such close relationships with the teachers, and like I was saying before, you can have these close relationships with the teachers, but you're able to be professional with them, so to create a good learning environment. I like the balance of subjects, and as a lot of people were saying in the alumni thing, of the correlations between subjects and the broadening of the mind to accept that you're not just learning chemistry, and that when you're confronted with a problem in the real world, you're not going to just think, oh, I learned this through my chemistry test. It's this idea and the way of figuring out a problem. And then to that point, kind of, it's not necessarily what you're learning, but how you're learning it, and the setting, and how you're kind of thinking about and how you're learning about it. One thing that kind of pops up to me is in the beginning of the year, when, I think one of my classmates raised the question. I don't know, I've heard this a lot through education, like, why do we need math? I'm never going to need to know what x plus y is. But I think a really important thing about that is Mr. Kimberly, our math teacher this year, had said that it's not, unless you're going into a field of rocket science, which who maybe you are, that's great, but it's mostly meant it's how you're thinking, it's how you're solving the problem, it's the correlations between all those other things that I mentioned, and how you're solving the problem.
Thank you, Jonas. Ren, would you like to speak next?
Sure. Okay, I was going to talk about my transition from public school to Lake Champlain, because my family travels across Lake Champlain every morning from New York to come to this school. And it's about an hour of travel for us. It's a relatively large commute. But we transferred from the public school because it wasn't really giving me a great experience. I didn't feel challenged, and it felt very kind of static. And I was really excited by this one art school that I had heard one of my friends talk about. So we began looking for art schools in our area, but because this is a pretty remote part of the US, there aren't a lot in our area. But we had some connections with Lake Champlain because my dad is a Waldorf kindergarten teacher. So we were already sort of familiar with the Waldorf philosophy. And so we knew about how integrated the arts is in their curriculum. So I went for a day to visit, and even with just that one, like those few hours of me being at the school with all those people, I think what was first so impressive to me was how, like, the quality of the community, how much better that felt to me to be in a space with these people. And I was very curious to see like what that would correlate to in me spending, like, having an education there. So we decided to go, and I think it was, looking back on it, it was a very, very good choice to make, because I value this community so much. It cultivates a really comfortable and I think an inspired space for learning, just because I know it's really apparent that the teachers enjoy what they're teaching and doing, and it keeps me really engaged. And I think a point of disinterest for a lot of people is that it's a small community, but for me personally, it's really, that's a huge plus for me. I don't mind that there aren't a lot of people. I enjoy the tight-knit community that it creates. I've always felt seen and heard here. I've not ever felt like my ideas or opinions or needs or wants were overlooked. And again, because the teachers are so invested in what's being taught, that was super helpful. And I think all of them have a real compassion for the individual students, which was also really striking. But yeah, I think the community here is nothing like anything I had experienced in other schools I've been to before. And I really believe, like, I'm glad, and I think it's worth the lengths we go to come here to be at the school and have this education. So
thank you so much, Ren. That's great. And I'd love to share some thoughts from some parents at this time. And I have three parents who have joined us today. We have Wendy Bratt, who's an alumni parent, and Trina Webster, who is a current parent, and Jen Zahorchak, who's also a current parent. And I know Wendy and Trina have prepared some thoughts. So either one of you who would like to, Wendy, why don't you jump in and talk first?
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be back in your midst. And Ren and Jonas, I so enjoyed listening to you. Thanks for sharing. So two of my sons attended the Lake Champlain Waldorf School from Morning Garden through 12th grade, and they graduated in 2014 and 2016. One in college, one of them studied physics as his undergrad, and astronomy in graduate school at Wesleyan University. And he's been working in tech in Cambridge, Mass, and is now about to move out to Palo Alto in Silicon Valley, which is blowing my mind a little bit right now, to work to support the manufacturing of electric cars with a company called Rivian. So given that neither of us are science people at all, it's just a surprise that actually both of my kids went into science. The other son is taking a year off from Colorado College right now and working just due to COVID. And he studies biology and ecology. So again, both kids unexpectedly became highly focused science kids in college. And it's amazing that all of us can look back after 7 years and we still consistently see how Waldorf education informed that and informs who these very well-balanced human beings are and what they're doing and what they're bringing to both their inner and outer worlds. And I don't have time enough to talk about how much I would love to talk about how Waldorf impacted my kids. So if anyone ever wants to hear more, my number is available from anybody at the school. When I asked both of them what parents might want to hear about their education at the Waldorf school, one of them sent me a 3-page essay and the other had a very brief dialogue with me. And those of you who know my kids know which did what. And it just says, it's one of the ways that say how remarkably different my kids are from one another. And I want to emphasize how Waldorf highly served them both in equal measure for very different reasons. And the main points of my conversations with them were, they said, most importantly, the Waldorf school focused much more on curiosity and discovery than on testing and tracking, which they liked because they both saw college as a time of greater developmental readiness to choose a track of study for themselves. One said he can see now that if he had been tracked then, back in high school, his direction would have been chosen before he was ready. And he would have gone into what he sees now as the wrong direction. So they both feel their passion for the subjects they've chosen is precisely because they didn't get pushed into AP focused classes. And I think it's amazing that so many of their college peers have come up to me over the years and told me they wished that their parents would have given them an education like Jonas and Aiden had, really because of that. Like they were tired of science by the time they got to college, which I think is so sad. And I just loved how Vinny described the sciences at the Waldorf school, because that is what fueled my boys in college. Absolutely. They both said, in essence, that they were, quote, dared to follow their dreams. Their teachers critically analyzed topics and ideas and carefully observed real life, particularly the sciences, with students, and that drew them in, and it allowed them to take their own directions at critical times. And teachers often let my kids dive into what academically turned them on in high school. And as such, they learned how to be curious and they learned how to follow a thread of interest. And they learned that learning was filled with adrenaline, and that's still so alive for them. Also, our kids learned to learn for the sake of learning. We remember clearly how truly incensed they both were in their early science classes when they would sit there, and math classes too, and they'd hear consistently over and over again other students asking, will this be on the test? And this was so foreign to them, to their familiar style of learning. It was really maddening. Like both of them would call us and tell us this, and it drove them crazy. And I've heard it from other parents and other college students in the sciences as well. They're old friends. So most important to me, thank you to the teachers here, our kids learn to interact closely with the teachers, both in and out of class, on trips, on projects, and on everyday life. I mean, my heart is like always so full for every one of their teachers every day. They solved everyday problems together. They learned to communicate in challenging times. Clara's mention of the birthday ritual of sharing gratitudes, to hear that from your teacher is profound. And they developed personal relationships. Like my son Aiden just borrowed a dehydrator from Miss Dews for his trip that he's on right now. And they learned, most importantly, that adults were accessible to them and allies to them. And I could tell you example after example about what a difference and how that impacted them in their college careers. And lastly, our son Jonas is the one who wrote the essay when I asked him what parents and students might want to hear about the impact of Waldorf school on them. And his last paragraph was this: ultimately, this boils the Waldorf value proposition down to a couple neat little slogans. Learn how to think, not what to think, is one of them. And the right question is more valuable than the right answer is the other. Our Waldorf school did not burn 4 years of my life impressing upon me what to think and asking me to return the right answer. It developed my ability to ask the right question. And to me, that has proven far more valuable. So thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Wendy. We're actively turning Jonas's essay into a blog post.
Nice.
So beautifully done.
Yeah.
Tells the story so well. Thank you. Trina, would you like to speak next about your thoughts?
I don't know. Wendy's a tough act to follow there. My name is Trina Webster. I am a parent of a current high school senior and an alumni who is a junior and in college. Everything that has been said today is 100% true and lives in me and in our family and in our daughters. So I decided to try to hear what was said and then maybe offer something different. So this is a little off the cuff. But what I would say is that you're making a financial investment, right? If you're gonna pay to do private high school before all of the expenses of college are staring you down, you need to know exactly what you're investing in. And we had a lot of discussion in our household about, this finite amount of money for education and where is it best used. And we felt very, very strongly after really learning about the high school when our kids were in the grade school, that Waldorf High School was a critical investment for their future because for a couple of reasons. The first is simply, it's everything that you've heard here, but it boils down into the kids really kind of having a liberal arts college experience in their high school years, in that, they're making connections and they're asking questions, and they are so ready at the end of those 4 years to understand the interdisciplinary nature of the world we live in and the complex communication questions that we have about dealing with people that I can't remember which, I think Clara or Avery said in the video, like, I'm with people all the time that I may not choose to be with, but they have become, they're my classmates, they become like family to you. And you learn how to navigate those relationships. And I think that that is extremely helpful. the other thing as a parent, I would say, is that high school is a time where your students are naturally leaving the nest, right? They're gravitating away from those parent relationships. And so you have to be there for them, but you kind of have to let them go in and out, right? And so what influences are they interacting with when they're leaving you as a parent? And they're interacting with, I think, as Wendy said, with these adults who they respect, who know them and love them and see them for who they are. And I would say as a parent, one of my challenges is allowing my kids to live into that. I already have this idea of this is who they are. Oh, I know this is how they're going to respond to this. And so one of the things I get from my investment in Waldorf High School is, for me, the teachers who are communicating back to me. This is who I see in your daughter. This is what I observe. This is where I think the real challenge lies. You've identified this, but have you considered that? And so it's almost like a wonderful team of co-parents at the time you need it most. When your certainty as a parent starts to slip because your child is individuating and you want that for them. And it's just such a safe environment for them to individuate into. Beyond safe, it's just flat out inspiring for them. The other thing I would say is, with regard to this, like investing in this liberal arts education before they go off to college, and this notion of who they are, I feel like Waldorf prepares your child for life after high school in such a unique way. My daughter is a junior at Bates College, and she loves it. Her professors, I mean, they're always asking her, like, where'd you come from, right? She's always asking questions. She's in it. As a freshman, one of her professors offered her a research opportunity in Alaska because it required for her to camp on, totally off the grid for a month and do some archaeological dig. And Hannah had all this outdoor experience from Waldorf, but really she just had the maturity. She was the only freshman college student invited to attend this research. And it's not because she's extraordinary. I mean, I love her, she's amazing, but her education provided that for her. It was because of Waldorf that she was ready to tackle that. So whether students graduate, in an entrepreneurial environment and they want to do something on their own and they're really not seeking a college environment, Waldorf gets them ready to meet the world. And if they are in a college preparatory environment, they are off the charts prepared because they already know how to advocate for themselves. They know who they are. They know how to navigate the world with the right questions rather than seeking the right answers. To grab Jonas's quote. So I also feel, I think I'm so far past my 2 minutes. I just want to wrap this up by saying, I just went through the college application process with my current senior, and I really felt that her Waldorf education really helped her college application process. When she would talk to, when she was having interviews with her colleges, they were so curious about her education and she had so much to say about it. And acceptances across the board because she stands out because of that. And that really helps, I think, with the college process. So those of you who know me know I overspeak, so just kidding.
Thank you so much, Trina.
Sure.
Also helpful. So I would like now to turn it over to our attendees to send in any specific questions you might have for our teachers that we have here, Emily and Danielle and Steve Crimmy, who's also a high school teacher who teaches history and math. And if you have questions for our parents or our students, we also have Jen Zohorchek as a parent who did not get to speak yet, but I'm going to just turn it over to questions that you can type in using the Q&A feature. But while I'm waiting for questions to come in, I just want to follow up on what you said, Trina, about college applications, and just talk a little bit about that process, that we do have a college guidance counselor that works with our students beginning in 11th grade, and they meet with her several times during their 11th grade year. She helps them to narrow down their list of schools that they're interested in, and then they meet regularly throughout the 12th grade year. And one of the things that she has specifically shared about the benefits of her providing this service to the students in their Waldorf experience, and also their LCWS experience, is that not only what Trina described as the students knowing themselves very well to prepare them for that application process, but that the teachers have such an astute understanding of the students that allows them to write recommendations for the students that are really spot on, and that are imbued with such a wisdom about the students that it really helps give them a leg up in their college application process. Over the past 6 years, 95% of our students have gone on to colleges, and you've seen some of the colleges that are on that list. I can certainly supply the list of colleges to anyone who's interested in following up with me afterwards, but you've heard about Bates and Smith and Wesleyan, NYU, American University, and then more close to home, our students also go to UVM and Middlebury. So I do see a couple of questions coming in. One question is, what kinds of trips do high school students take through the years? Who would like to speak to that question? Just raise your hand if you would like to answer that question about the trips that we offer. Go ahead, Jonas.
I mean, I'm only in 10th grade, so I'm not perfect on the ones onward, but I know there's the New York City trip in 11th grade, I'm pretty sure. I've heard really good things about that. Just like a stay over in New York City, I don't know how long. And then there's the Odyssey trip, which was a kind of start, I kind of forget exactly where, but you go down south Vermont along Lake Champlain, and then it's about, I kind of forget how long it is. I'm gonna guess like maybe 8 days, canoeing up Lake Champlain and staying there, and it's with Croca. And I have really good memories of that trip. It was kind of a chaotic time for us, but it was my first year at the high school, and it was something new, and it was engaging, and it was intense, but not like crazy intense, but you were just like always in it. And it was very immersive, and kind of started my year off because it was the beginning of the year. So kind of gave a little boost to my year, and I keep thinking back on it with fond memories. And then usually in 9th grade, you do the winter backpacking trip. But since I did the Odyssey trip in 9th grade, it would be this year, but because of COVID, that hasn't happened yet. But it's basically another really intense winter backpacking intensive in New Hampshire, I believe, with your class for a while. Yeah. And then there's little bitty trips and stuff. Well, not necessarily little ones, but speckled throughout the year. Those are the big ones.
Thank you, Jonas. Do any teachers want to pipe in about the trips?
Well,
go ahead, Steve.
I think it's fair to say that for our school, like a lot of places, the pandemic has really disrupted our sort of travel program, our trip schedules. And I think with the restructuring of the high school, that the specific trips will be probably different than they've been in the past, but that the general theme of the trips, which is being outdoors, the kind of outdoor expedition kind of trips, and trips that are associated with the curriculum, particularly the science curriculum. I imagine that the trips going forward will take up one or both of those aspects. But what they specifically will be, we will probably have a better sense of that in a month or two when the pandemic starts to get resolved.
Great, thank you. Any other teachers have words to share about trips? Okay. Another question that's being asked brings up, so this question is, well, first of all, Lee says, as parents, we wish we had this experience in high school. Many of us do. And we are wondering the school's approach to bullying, or if this is even an issue in the community. So I wonder if anyone could speak to the social dynamic in the high school and how it might relate to that question.
I'm happy to start, and then Steve, I saw your hand raised as well. And I think one of the things that's really important for our school is the understanding of the community and of the students. And so, like Jazz said, that teachers work to really understand what's going on before it reaches a threshold of bullying. And it does happen. And when it does, that it is something that we take very seriously. We are really interested in how to work with the like restorative circles and that kind of thing to make sure that the students are supported in both the students who have experienced it and also understanding that as a community, our goal is not to reject people who are in it, but to work to reintegrate, to be to understand the impact of their actions and to rejoin a really safe and healthy community.
Steve, would you like to add anything else?
I don't think so. Maybe just that one of the things that goes on at the school is that we have a regular weekly meeting with students that is in large part about the social dynamic and what's going on. And for the most part, I think social issues get dealt with before they get to that point, which is not to say that they never get to that point, but I think they much less frequently get to that point maybe than in other settings because we have a regular practice of tending to the social fabric of the school.
Great, thank you, Steve. Another question that has come in is, please speak about diversity at Waldorf. Are there any teachers, administrators of color, and how do you prepare students for a multicultural world? It's a big question.
I'll take this one. It is a big question, and it's one that we've been sort of working around in a spiral way for many years in this community. About 5% of our faculty and our students identify as members of a cultural or racial minority group. And we also try to talk about diversity in a way that recognizes that not all diversity is visible. And so we try to really pull out the different parts of students' identities that give them that foundation to recognize and assume and honor human diversity as they encounter it. Our demographics are basically the same as those of the community in which we find ourselves, and that's not an excuse for not trying harder to bring in more people and more perspective and a broader sense of what it means to be human in this world. And so there are ways in which we're working on that and talking about that. Our diversity, inclusion, and equity group is having a meeting this coming Thursday, I think, that if you're interested, you could reach out to Amy. I'm not sure if it's open to people outside of the community, but that could be a good way to just get a picture into how we are working to make sure that we are a community that is safe and welcoming for people of color. And then also that we are reaching out in a way that doesn't tokenize them when they come.
Thank you, Jazz. Another question that's come up is about, that I think I'll wrap into two questions together, is about just what a typical day might look like for in the high school, and what we're thinking about that for the new take on the program that we're looking at for next year. I wonder, Emily, are you able to speak to that, kind of give a description of what might be the difference in how a day in the life of a Waldorf high school student happens?
Sure. I would love someone to jump in a moment, because I was answering a question in the chat, so I might be a little I wasn't thinking so much about that one. But the program this year is even more integrated. In the past, we have had a really good experiences with what we would call immersions, where students are working with one topic interdisciplinarily throughout the day. So the botany class that I mentioned was one of those. And so this upcoming year, with a smaller student body who can be more nimble and can go out into the community as well in sort of more simplified, easier way, we're going to be using that immersion model to work on to work on it, to experience the topics that we would normally experience in individual classes.
I wonder if either of the students want to talk a little bit about what the difference is in your typical day, as opposed to a different high school experience. I know, Ren, you've had a public school experience, and Jonas, you have not. But does either of you have something to share about how your day might be different?
Sure. Yeah. So we have in the morning, so there was a lot of noise going on, so I couldn't hear what Ms. Fuchs got to say. But in the morning we have a big, it's 2 hours, about a big chunk of time that's devoted to the main lesson of the day, and that will generally kind of thread through the rest of our lessons that happen to varying extents, whether it's a immersion or a more separate block of learning, but that takes up most of the morning. And then we have a 20-minute snack period and two shorter periods follow that. I have never really been great with paying a lot of attention to timing, so I go with the flow of students and where they're going, so I'm bad at the specific periods. But we have smaller, like, track classes, I guess, in between those. So we have math and language and music. Our art blocks are usually later in the day, and those often take up more time. So those shift with our main lessons. So the big blocks in the morning shift monthly about, and those cycle through with our art blocks. So we just finished up a art block in acrylic painting, and our next block is going to be in woodworking. And we're in a main lesson block of projective geometry, which is studying the nature of infinity, which is rather mind-bending and very cool. And we have other classes kind of interspersed in between that aren't exactly track classes, but they have the same amount of time devoted to them, whether it be shorter or longer. We have an outdoor education block on Thursdays, and a like a social justice period called Unbound, where we speak about social justice issues. But yeah, yes, it's very, very different from public school. I initially struggled with how how much longer the classes were, because I was so used to having like 10 periods a day, and now we only had 4 for like, or a little more than that. But I think having lived into it a little more, it became much easier for me to really stay present and engaged in what was happening in the blocks. And I feel that I always I come out of it having really like lived into the time that was given to it. With the shorter periods in public school, it was much harder for me to really be present in what was going on. But this the longer blocks really helped me stay engaged. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ren. Go ahead, Trina. We're going to try to wrap up in the next minute or so, but I'd love to hear if you have a last thought.
Just wanted to mention that I have a sleepyhead high school student, and high school students just biorhythmically have a hard time in the morning. They do morning movement every day. So the kids, they get there and they're walking, or they're doing yoga, or they're doing something to invigorate their system. I think it's critical. It makes a really big difference in what Ren was talking about with attention span for longer classes.
That is so important. Thank you. And I do want to emphasize that there's generally more movement throughout the day, more outdoor time, and more being in the physical body that really promotes that balance, that well-rounded approach to education. I know there are probably other questions that will be percolating for those of you who have attended today, and I am more than happy to schedule one-on-one time with you, or for you to reach out to me through email with your specific questions. And I'm just so grateful for all of you coming today. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your time and your thoughts and your experience. And I will be sharing this recording with anyone who is interested after we wrap up. Thank you all so much.